นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนะมัสสามิ Blessings. Good morning to you all. Very happy to be here. Perhaps the reason I managed to have the time, the chance to come to Malaysia, because just been in Thailand for Lumpur Anand's birthday, and I lived with him for 10 years, and knew him before that as well, and have known him ever since. So basically, as long as I've been a monk, I've known him and respected him as a teacher. And this year he's 69, so it was a good time to go and pay respects to him on his birthday, 31st of March. And then, so this is like on the return leg going home, stop in to visit some of the lay supporters in KL, including yourselves. There's a big part of our practice as monks, and you might say particularly forest monks, students of Ajahn Chah's, we give respect to our elders, teachers. It's actually part of our monastic training that we look after our teachers, both their physical needs when they're ill or just to try and make life convenient for them. But also, you know, there's a very special spiritual relationship between teacher and student. And if you want to learn the Dhamma, if you're new to the Dhamma, say you're a new student, and that includes lay people as well as Sangha, you have to open up your mind, your heart to teachers, not just the Buddha. Obviously, the Buddha is our number one teacher, and we still have his words from the Tripitaka, which is our great good fortune in this day and age. But also living teachers are invaluable because obviously they're alive and they can you can develop a rapport with them, and they get to know you and guide you, and not just answer questions, but they provide a living example of how to practice the Dhamma for the end of suffering. So Ajahn Chah, my first teacher, emphasized this part of the training to give respect, reverence, and care for teachers, preceptors. They're the ones who actually ordain us, make us become monks or nuns. To care for them, respect for them, give value to their words because they have experience, and generally look after them. And that theme runs through the entire Sangha. So even if you meet a senior monk who's not directly your teacher, you still tend to give respect and look after that monk. It's a practice we call Acharya Vata. The proper practice is with an Acharya, which means teacher. They usually call us Ajahn, which comes from the word Acharya. In the lay society we have it as well. Often we are quite, hopefully, reasonably respectful to our teachers, you know, say at school, universities and so on. But it's really emphasized in the monastic tradition, the monastic form. So I spent my first 6 years as a monk helping to care for Lumpur Cha, who had become ill, as part of that practice. You're caring for your teacher, and if they are ill, that often can be quite involved in spending long periods of time with the teacher, helping to provide medical care in different ways, physiotherapy, massage, just keeping things clean and tidy and so on, all kinds of service and duties. is very much at the heart of our practice as Buddhist monks. And for myself, remembering that, just listening to my own biography, it jogged your memory. My memory is that it was always my great good fortune to be able to serve my teacher. As I look upon his teachings, the words and the Dhamma that I got from Luang Por Chah is like, if you were ill and you got life-saving medicine, you would be very grateful to whoever gave you that medicine. That kind of feeling is like, gives your life meaning when you meet somebody who understands Dhamma and can pass it on in different ways to you. You feel like, oh, so grateful and so much joy to have had that opportunity. So I spent a lot of my early years looking after Ajahn Chah. After he passed away, I moved to live with Ajahn Anand, who I visited the other day, and was very grateful for that opportunity. Now I'm kind of in a different role. I am the teacher myself in Australia, but I still have my teachers in Thailand, and sometimes they come and visit us, which is always very pleasant. So it's not like once you become a teacher, you stop learning or you stop being a student. It just means you actually do more. You're a student and a teacher at the same time. That's how Ajahn Chah taught us. He said, when you go and teach other people, you're teaching yourself as well. And you can't forget that. And I know here, many good people do good work at the Nalanda Center, helping to run the center, run courses. Yesterday you had an amazing workshop here on the 32 parts of the body. And you had a lot of monks. Pity you didn't have 32 monks. I heard you had 29 monks. Well, that's almost 32. Must be one of the most unglamorous workshops you could think of. A workshop on the 32 parts of the human body. Sounds like medical school or something. But it's actually very valuable because this is part of what we call the first foundation of mindfulness, training in paying attention and learning about your own body. But Nalanda Center has many events, publications, study courses, meditation retreats, of course, many things. So not that much different from a monastery. So I think some of the things that Luang Por Chah taught us monks will also apply in a place like this. How to serve other people as you practice yourself for yourself. You practice the Dhamma, but at the same time you're helping others. Very much at the heart of the Buddhist teachings. You probably know that simile the Buddha gave of how you practice, gave the simile of the acrobat and his daughter who would put on shows in the time of the Buddha, and they would train together, and just before they had finished their training, before they went out to give their first display of their skills on the tightrope, doing various gymnastics and acrobatic feats, the father said to the daughter, okay, daughter, you're well trained, so you look after me and I'll look after you. And the daughter said, well, that's almost correct, but can I just adjust it so that if I look after myself first, then I'll be able to look after you. If you look after yourself first, and then you'll be able to look after me. That's a more correct way of saying it. It's a very subtle point, but this is something you learn from Buddhist monasticism and just the Buddhist practice in general, is that in order to help other people, you have to help yourself first. And Ajahn Chah was a very good example of this. I was just talking with the committee how he was a monk who practiced what he preached. He did what he told other people to do, he would do himself. He was not just a teacher from the books alone, say, reciting or passing on information that he had gleaned from the books. He taught as he had practiced, as he had lived. And Buddhism is a living tradition, and it applies to life as we live it. It's not just a teaching to be found in dusty books in shelves. There's that part of it. There's the philosophy. There's the ancient teachings, the texts. Of course, they have a role, but it's a living teaching, and we practice what the Buddha taught. And in order to do that which is beneficial and serve the community, we also need to practice for ourselves. Somebody just asked, how do you teach young people either not to take drink or drugs, or if they are taking drink and drugs, how to give it up? And I said, well, the first thing is whoever is asking this question has to do it themselves. So, for example, at our monastery, many concerned parents, and it's a very valid concern, they'll come and they say, oh, I'm worried about my 18-year-old son. He's hanging around with the wrong crowd. He's probably drinking or drinking too much or doing other things. What do I do? And the first thing I always say is, well, do you drink alcohol? Do you take alcohol? And if they say yes, so they say, well, that's where you start. If you want to help your son or your daughter, you have to start with yourself, don't you? It's the same with meditation. The concerned parent comes to see me and says, oh, my son or my daughter, they have what we call short samadhi. Short samadhi, ADAH, or what these different terms we have now for people who find it hard to concentrate, and maybe a child is diagnosed, they go to school and they can't sit still, can't concentrate on their books. They have short samadhi. So they come to me and say, please teach him to have longer samadhi, to be able to sit longer, be more calm, more patient, concentrate better. So can you teach my son or daughter to meditate? I say, sure, yeah, I can. But do you meditate? If mum and dad are not meditating, why on earth would child meditate? The only way I could think, maybe in a sort of strange kind of rebelliousness, my mum and dad don't meditate, so I'm going to meditate. Because often teenagers will do the opposite of what their parents do. That's probably not the best motivation for meditation. But, if it's a Buddhist monastery or a Buddhist center, it's a place where we practice, and from the top down or from the bottom up, everyone is here to practice, whether it's the organizers, the committees, the teachers, or the students, whatever age, the new one, the older one, we're all in a position of learning. And that's how the Buddha encouraged us to view Buddhism and Buddhist practice. We're learning from our experience. And to learn, you need to open your mind. You need to kind of wake up, pay attention to, first of all, yourself, what you're doing, what you're saying, what you're thinking, which is hardest of all, we know, because thoughts are very fast and they're invisible and they come and go. So to learn from your own thoughts, it takes a bit of effort to pay attention. But we're here to learn, aren't we? That's Buddhist practice, and we're here to learn. And so you have to, first of all, have that willingness to accept, I don't know everything yet. We might call that a form of humility, genuine humility, where you say, oh, the Buddha was one who knew. The Buddha was, we believe, enlightened, awakened. All his teachings make good sense. They seem to fit together and give us this pathway to end our suffering, to this state of awakening. So we trust in the Buddha, but maybe we come back and look at ourselves and we say, but maybe I'm not very enlightened. I can't do this. That's okay. You have to start from a place where you recognize you still are not yet fully knowledgeable about this path towards enlightenment, what we call nibbana. You're open to learning. You want to be enlightened in the sense you want to be beyond suffering. You want to be free from stress and suffering in your life. But you also have to accept, if I am still caught into stress and suffering, there must be something I don't know yet. Otherwise, why would I be stressed? So the beginning part of practice is recognizing that there's more we have to learn. that's why a center like this is such a valuable place. It's a place where you can come and learn and practice and deepen your understanding of what the Buddha was pointing to. There's that story they used to tell in the old times. There was a young monk, and he was having trouble accepting new ideas, new teachings. And he said to his teacher, my mind is just full of knowledge already. I don't think I can accept or learn anything new. There's no room left, no space. I've just spent all my time, as a young person studying at school, college. Now I'm a monk. I just feel so full of knowledge. There's no room left, no possibility to learn anything more. So he was a bit depressed. And the teacher said, go and get a bucket full of pebbles. He got a bucket full of pebbles and put it down. And then he said, get some sand, bring the sand, and now pour some of this sand into the pebbles. And the monk said, well, the bucket's full of pebbles, there's no room for the sand. He said, well, try it. So he poured some sand in, and of course, there's always gaps between the pebbles, so the sand went down. So now this bucket was already full of pebbles, now it's full of sand. And the teacher says, so is the bucket full? And he said, well, it looks full to me. There's no room for anything else. So he said, well, go and get some water. He poured water in, and of course there's still gaps between the grains of sand, the pebbles. And he poured the water in, and it took quite a lot of water. It disappeared into the bucket. And the teacher's point was that your mind is like that. When you begin practicing, you're often thinking, I know already, I know what I'm doing. You may have a job, family, you've got a bank account, a car, a house, you've got all the things you need to live in this world. You might think, I'm already a complete person, I know. I'm already like that bucket full of pebbles. But then you come along and hear some Dhamma or practice some Dhamma, and you realize, well, I know some things, but there's still room to learn more. This is the kind of attitude the Buddha was encouraging us to start with, to have some humility and accept, okay, I know some things, but not everything. There's room to improve, room to learn more, new things, new information, new techniques, new understandings, new insights, we say. If you can start from that point, then you've got an opportunity to go deeper into the practice. So this is coming back to why, say, for Buddhist monks, why do you respect your teacher? Because you accept, well, you begin practicing, there'll be some things you don't know yet that maybe the teacher does. And if the teacher is a well-practiced, good teacher, someone like Ajahn Chah, for example, well, they know a lot. Many, many more things than you know, and maybe they even know you better than yourself. So many of his students had that experience when they came to study or live with Ajahn Chah. They may have learned a lot already, even as monks. Monks, we do study, we learn from the suttas, the Tripitaka, and some of his students were actually quite skilled in their scholarly knowledge, textbook knowledge, before they came to see Ajahn Chah. But then when they joined Ajahn Chah, they realized, now I've got to learn on a different level, learn from my heart and my experience, rather than just memorizing the texts and the books. So, for example, one monk I know, he was already what we call a maha. He's a scholar in the Pali, studied the textbooks, very knowledgeable, and a teacher. But he realized, I still don't know everything. My mind is not yet peaceful. I have a short fuse. He had a short temper. I want to learn how to meditate. I want to deepen my understanding of what the Buddha taught. So he came to live with Ajahn Chah. And straight away, Ajahn Chah knew this guy. He told the other monks, this guy's got a short fuse, short temper. Be very careful around him. And Ajahn Chah called him the tiger. Tigers pounce, they're fierce. And the monk actually had a big tiger tattoo on his arm. And Ajahn Chah was, he wanted to keep the monk happy, so he didn't call him a tiger, but when he talked to other people, he called him the tiger. And one day a man came to stay in the monastery and talk to Ajahn Chah and learn a bit about the Dhamma. And in those days, the forest was very big and open. There weren't many buildings, and it was quite a scary place. It was dark, and there were wild animals around. And Ajahn Chah wanted to teach this monk with the tiger tattoo on his arm, because he saw the monk's problem was he was full of knowledge and a bit conceited, proud because of this knowledge. He wouldn't listen to anyone else in the monastery. So he's kind of a little bit isolated from the rest of the monks because he thought he knew everything. But on the other hand, he realized perhaps he doesn't know everything, but he wasn't managing this problem very well. So he came across as a little bit conceited. So Ajahn Chah was trying to find a way to teach him, to reduce his conceit, to make him more humble so he could start learning, practicing mindfulness. So this old man from the village came to see Ajahn Chah, and on his way out of the monastery, he asked Ajahn Chah, what's the best way back to the village? And there were a few very simple paths through the forest, but very easy to get lost. Like when I first was a monk, I would get lost going down some of these paths because you're not familiar with the place. So this old man was walking back out of the monastery, and he asked Ajahn Chah, where do I go? And he said, go left here, right there, and when you see that hut over there, walk past, but you better just stop and pause and look around it. And the man said, why? Why do I need to look around it? He said, because we have a pet tiger here, and you don't want to meet the pet tiger, it could be a bit dangerous. So just check whether the pet tiger is around, and if it's all clear, then just keep walking. So he went past this hut where the monk with the tiger tattoo was staying, and he was upstairs, and he started walking around because he's so scared of tigers. Everyone's scared of tigers in Thailand. He's walking around, where's the tiger, where's the tiger? And he didn't see the tiger, but as he was walking around, the monk upstairs saw him, and he came down and said, what are you doing? Why are you walking around this hut? And he said, I'm looking for the Luang Por Chah's pet tiger. Have you seen it? I'm worried, I don't want to meet it. And the monk, he said his heart dropped at that point because he knew exactly what Ajahn Chah was doing. Ajahn Chah was referring to him, the pet tiger, because he had a ferocious temper like a tiger. And this man had just been kind of part of the teaching method, a very indirect way of just saying, you have a bad temper, you've got to start being more restrained, more mindful of your temper, by calling him a tiger. But he didn't even say it himself. Ajahn Chah, very smart. He got this man to realize he was thought of as a tiger. And of course, the old villager walked away happily, and the monk now has to live with this thought, Ajahn Chah is thinking I'm a tiger. I'm a monk, and a monk shouldn't be a tiger, so now I've got to start being much more careful, because he was one who lost his temper easily before. And he said he spent the rest of his life as a monk learning to let go of his bad temper. And he became a very sweet old monk before he died. He's passed away now, but I knew him very well. And he had lots of knowledge, but he also realized the real knowledge is the knowledge that is looking after your heart, keeping your heart calm, composed, so that you can see the truth. So in the instance of, say, your thoughts of anger, or the emotion of anger when it comes up, getting to the point where you can restrain it, not act like a tiger, restrain it, but also contemplate it and see it as, we say, impermanent, as not self. Because what is anger? Anger is a reaction to something, isn't it? You hear or see something you don't like, don't agree with, it triggers an unpleasant feeling. Maybe first you get the feeling, then you start thinking the negative thoughts because you have that feeling about something, and then you're suffering. And this is a very well-trodden path. Certainly somebody with short temper will have trodden that path many times. They see something they don't like, they hear something they don't like, they think of something they don't like. The unpleasant feeling arises, the mental proliferation starts, the story, the thoughts, the names, the story begins, and you end up suffering very quickly. our practice is getting us to the point where we can see that, to recognize anger is suffering, therefore it should be abandoned, let go of. And then how do you do that? Well, by practicing mindful awareness of your own moods, thoughts, feelings, and your reactions to things. So if you are a tiger, you'll need a lot. What do you do with tigers? You have to give them a lot of kindness, compassion. And we know tigers can be tamed. People tame tigers, and they become much more peaceful animals, closer to humans. Maybe they can be tamed. You always have to be careful with a large animal like a tiger, but maybe it's possible to tame a tiger. In the similar way, it's possible to tame your mind, isn't it? Through the practice. This is the kind of knowledge Luang Por Chah or the Buddha was trying to give us. The way we can actually improve our lives by being more aware of our own emotions, thoughts, and particularly the process by which suffering arises for us on a daily basis. The triggers, the reactions, the ripples. One of Ajahn Chah's favorite teachings, he compared the human mind to a leaf on a tree. And if there's no wind, everything is still, your leaf is just hanging there like a mind that is not stirred up by anything. Usually you feel normal, don't you? There's nothing stimulating you, you're not getting anything good, anything bad, everything is kind of normal. Your mind is fairly still, isn't it? But as soon as something comes your way, it could be something very pleasant, kind of pulls your mind one direction, or something very painful or unpleasant pulls it another direction. This leaf starts to move, doesn't it? In response to if it's on a tree, it's in response to a wind. But the Buddha compared these winds to the normal experiences of human beings. So you get pleasure, pain, success, failure, praise and blame, gain and loss. They're very simple concepts, but actually if you investigate them, these are the normal experiences of daily life, aren't they? Sometimes you get things, the thing you want, you work, you earn money, but then you get lost, you spend your money. Either you actually lose your money or it's stolen, or you spend it and it's gone. So you get gain and you get loss. People give you things, but then you use up things, so then those things are gone, they're lost. Praise and blame, we all get some praise. Sometimes people appreciate us, recognize what we've done. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes people blame us for something or criticize us, speak harshly to us. Sometimes what they say is true, sometimes it's not. But just if you step back from your experience, you can see, well, these are quite normal things, aren't they? You get some praise, some blame, some gain, some loss, some success, some failure, and just pleasure and pain. You came into this room and you sat down, you probably felt quite okay. The aircon is on, you're not too hot. You have a cushion or a chair, you're feeling comfortable. But the longer I talk, people start to wriggle, don't they? Because your body can't stay perfectly comfortable in one posture for that long. After a while, posture actually reveals the pain of a human body. You sit for a while, it starts to hurt, so you move, or you stand up. But you stand for a while, you get tired. You get really tired, you lie down. But you can't lie down for that long, you get bed sores. So you have to get up again. So pleasure and pain are also very normal experiences in daily life. Mostly it's very manageable, very small amounts of pleasure, small amounts of pain, but it's happening. So these are like what we call 4 pairs of experience, life experience that everyone is going through. Sometimes more on one side, more than another, but everyone experiences them. And the mind is like the leaf on the tree being blown by these worldly winds, is what the Buddha called them. So how do you deal with them? Well, this is why the Buddha said you need this inner knowledge of the way things are to understand what's going on. If you are stressed or angry or worried or obsessed with something and just not peaceful, why? What's going on? That's the kind of knowledge the Buddha was encouraging us to develop. This is what the Noble Eightfold Path is all about, developing inner awareness, but to combine with wisdom and understanding, to know your experience and free yourself from the endless reactions of holding on to pleasure and pain, grasping at them, identifying with them. You might say to raise your mind up to a higher level where it's transcending them, is knowing these experiences, but not getting lost in them. This is why the Buddha, on the night of his enlightenment, he sits on a seat made of 8 packs or bales of straw, grass. The farmer who offered him to make a seat, he brought eight packages of grass and made this seat for the Buddha. And the Buddha said, these are the 8 worldly winds. I'm going to sit on top of them, meaning I'm aiming to raise my awareness and my knowledge and understanding higher than them. We all know what it's like when you're down with the worldly winds. It hurts. You suffer. You get something you like and then you lose it and you feel unhappy. Or you meet with something you don't like and you're unhappy. That's the normal experience, isn't it? What we call the ups and downs of daily existence, living in the world. Nothing is constant. You're not always healthy. Sometimes you get ill. People don't always like you. Sometimes they don't like you. People don't always treat you well. Sometimes they don't treat you very well. But then sometimes things go well, but maybe not for long, and then it changes. Life is like that. It's a mixture. And that's why we have this experience of suffering as human beings, is because we often feel like we've been blown about by the world and the experience of living in the world, family, work, health, money, all these things. So the Buddha encouraged us to develop this inner knowledge or inner awareness so we can deal with that. And also so we can help other people as well. We're stronger and have better understanding about ourselves, then we can help other people. So this is the kind of knowledge that we develop through the Buddhist practice. So it starts with the study, the learning, the listening, and that's a good start. But then we have to put it into practice. That's the hard part. They say for meditation, they say the hardest part of meditation is getting people to begin it. Getting people onto the cushion is the hardest part. Once you're on the cushion, then you can engage, you can practice mindfulness. There's many techniques, reflections, and basic mindfulness practices, such as anapanasati. I'm sure you've all tried a bit of that. Many, many ways to meditate, develop mindfulness and insight. But first of all, you have to start. So I once had a dream of Ajahn pulling me with a rope to the meditation cushion. That's what a good teacher does. They have to pull people in because their mind is going out to the world, isn't it? You've always got something better to do than meditate. There's always somebody you have to talk to, something you have to do. Even if you're putting your attention on the breath, there'll be something you think you have to think about during that meditation period. You'll say, oh, I got this problem I got to solve. I better solve that now. Forget the breath. Let's just think about this. That's what our mind does, isn't it? It wants to go away from the present moment, from the problem. But as soon as you become a little bit more aware of what's going on, you realize this is the worldly winds pushing us around. So say you're sitting here now, what happens? You're sitting and you feel comfortable for a while, and say you get a little bit of pain in your back or your leg. What's the first thing you do? You tend to react. You start thinking about something else to distract you from your ache or your pain or whatever the problem is. You tend to seek something else, something better or different to distract you, take your mind away. If there wasn't a rule, you'd all be pulling out your phone, wouldn't you? If you're at work or at home, if you're feeling bored or restless or a loose end, you'll pull out your phone to distract you. Maybe not in every situation, but that's a very common reaction to things, isn't it? If it's not your phone, it will be eating, eating and drinking, talking to someone. We always look for something to do. And that's just the human mind is acting like a leaf being pushed around by the winds. So you have a little bit of desire come up, I want something, off your mind rushes away, so you're lost in some imagination, fantasy, whatever. You meet with some unpleasant experience that's quite hard to put up with. Your mind rushes away to think about something else. Maybe you talk to your friend and say, oh, my day, I had a terrible day today. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but what we tend to do is move away from any kind of suffering or any kind of unpleasantness or things that are difficult to be within our mind. We'll tend to move away, run away from them. But when you start meditating, you're bringing up this higher awareness of mindfulness and investigating the truth. You realize, this is not easy, is it? You're mindful of the breath for 10 seconds, and then the next thought comes and takes you away. So you need to practice, and you need to develop some strength of mind, build up this ability to maintain mindful awareness on an object, which is very much at the center of not just meditation practice, but just Buddhist training in itself. Centers around training the heart. Number one quality that's always useful, always helpful to you, is bringing out this quality of mindfulness, to know yourself in the present moment. What you're thinking, how you're feeling, what you're doing. People are always asking me, how do I practice mindfulness in daily life? Well, they asked Ajahn this question. He said, be able to ask yourself at any point in your day, morning, afternoon, night, what am I doing now? And then you answer that question to yourself. What am I doing now? So, what am I doing now? I'm giving a Dhamma talk. What are you doing now? You're listening. You're in this center, your body is sitting here, you're listening to a talk, you're practicing mindfulness of sitting. At work, what task are you doing? You're driving your car, what are you doing? You're eating your meal or cooking your meal, what are you doing? I'm doing this, I'm doing that. That's the most basic practice of mindfulness through your day. It's just bringing your attention to the present moment, asking yourself, what am I doing now? Or what's happening now? And then answering it. You also have to answer that. And that's this quality of wisdom or clear comprehension. So you'll read in the text, the Buddha says, mindful and clearly comprehending, she drinks a cup of water. That's how the Buddha taught, isn't it? When you're drinking a cup of water, you are mindful of drinking a cup of water. And doesn't mean to say you can't do 101 other things, but at that moment you have to know you're drinking a cup of water, otherwise your hand won't even pick up the cup or you'll knock the cup over. And these things happen. Occasionally you see either yourself or someone else, pick up a cup of water and spill it. Or if it's a cup of hot coffee, you're drinking, it's too hot, so you have to put it down. We're often getting caught out when we're not fully aware of what we're doing or why, perhaps, in many different situations. But just bringing up this quality of mindfulness over and over again through our day is one of the roots or the heart of our practice, so that we can know ourselves and know our mind better. And what happens is it starts to reveal things like, if I'm suffering, what's happening? Why do I feel I'm suffering? Well, there was this situation where somebody said something, I heard it, didn't feel very good about what they said. Maybe I disagree with what they said, or it hurt my feelings, or it's just annoying. There's a feeling, and then the next thing we say proliferating. Or you see something that you really like, and you say, I want that, or I like that, I want more of that, I want to be like that. And the next thing is you start thinking about it, imagining, if only I could get that thing, have that thing, be that way. And you start imagining in a more positive way of how to get that or be that, have that experience. As you practice mindfulness, you're more aware of these movements of your mind. And particularly from the point of view of you're aiming to understand why your mind is not particularly peaceful or it's stressed in different situations. So you're starting to see the process of cause and effect. Something unpleasant happens, brings you maybe some physical feeling of discomfort or some mental impingement of discomfort. How do you meet with that? How do you relate to that? How do you react in that situation? This is the practice. And if you're able to pay attention at that moment, you might notice, oh, there's an unpleasant feeling, some tension in the body. Next thing that happens is you start thinking in a more negative way based on that feeling. So you've probably heard about this. Dhamma or craving or the expression of suffering in the mind as it arises dependent on feelings. So if you're have a pleasant feeling, you tend to like that. You want that. You are attracted to that. If you have an unpleasant feeling, you want to get rid of it. You reject it. You want to get rid of that. And this can happen in so many ways because we've got senses. We've got our 5 physical senses, and then the mind is a 6th sense. So you can have pleasant and unpleasant feeling just based on memory of previous things that have happened, or it can be some external impingement. But it's going on all the time. And if we're not very mindful, the mind is going into this state of mental proliferation, creating stories based on our reactions of liking or disliking. And if you read the Anapanasati Sutta or mindfulness, teachings on mindfulness from the Buddha, what does he always say? He says the yogi, it could be man, woman, they're meditating, they set aside thoughts of delight and aversion for the world. They set them aside, they let them go. That's what mindfulness practice begins with, isn't it? Recognizing where you're getting caught into a mental proliferation based on some kind of desire for or against. For is, you're attracted to something, you like something, you want it, so you start thinking in that way and your mind is moving with that. Or you are averse, you're rejecting an experience, you say, I don't want this, get this away. We've actually been doing that since we were a baby. And you see it in babies, they see something they like, they crawl towards it to get it and have it. They see something they don't like, they say, I don't want this, get rid of it, push it away. We're still doing that. It's just when we're adults, we're a little bit more subtle about it, more careful and maybe more sophisticated. But it's the same dynamic. Your mind is moving towards or away. So Ajahn Chah said it's like, this leaf is constantly moving, your mind is moving, and that's tiring. Leaves sometimes get blown off the tree as well. When you have a real storm in your life, maybe it really knocks you for 6, don't it? If you have a really unpleasant thing, like say you get really ill or have an accident or a relationship problem or lose your job or something, well, that's like the leaf maybe getting knocked off the tree altogether. Hurricane force. Usually it's not that bad. Usually it's just small kind of movements, isn't it? Small breezes of something pleasurable, something unpleasant, but it's fairly small scale. But it's movement. And you can imagine if you're watching your mind every day, practicing this mindfulness, you become aware of these movements. One of your first insights maybe is that, well, this is quite tiring. My mind always moving around, wanting things, not wanting things. This is stressful, it's suffering. Maybe quite minor suffering, but it's suffering. And occasionally it can be very major emotional turmoil or very strong negative mind states. What can I do about it? Well, the more you're mindful, the more you can see this process of why the mind moves, where it's coming from. And as you establish mindfulness, that can help you to let go of some of the attachment to that process. When you're mindful, you get this quality we call equanimity, detached awareness. This helps you to be more at ease, more peaceful with the way things are going in your mind, and maybe not always follow the movement of grasping at or pushing away. So with the practice of mindfulness, you tend to get more stillness of mind, more equanimity, more calm. And these are very pleasant, desirable qualities. And from the stillness, you can see more clearly what's going on. So it leads on to wisdom or understanding. So the Buddha said, you practice mindfulness, it's like having water that's all, there's ripples on it, or it's full of dirt and cloudy and you can't see anything in it, but it's like that water is stilling. The sediment settles, the ripples go quiet, and then you can see into the water very clearly, and it's maybe you can see everything in there. It's quite amazing. All the things you never noticed before, you can see. Like when you go to the ocean and maybe you have a calm day when there's no wind, you can look down, you see fish or coral, or it may even be rubbish on the floor of the ocean, but you're seeing everything very clearly. That's like when you still your mind with mindfulness, you now start to see what's going on, where suffering is coming from, see the nature of your thoughts, you see the nature of your experience. And particularly you can see this process of cause and effect, one thing leading to another, and you can maybe interrupt that process. So it's not just automatic or habitual, like when you're in a kind of a daze or blurry. You can actually say, well, I'm going to let go of this reaction of anger or this reaction of desire, wanting something. If it's something you don't really need, you might say, I'm going to let go of this. And you bring your mind to stillness, and then you can really see how to let go. So this is why the Buddha encouraged us to develop this path of mindfulness, reflection, training the mind, and it will help us to be more at peace and understand more how to be you might say, a more complete human being, a human being with less suffering. I think everyone would agree that's a good thing. So maybe for this morning, I'll just say this much in the talk.